Dear colleagues, dear friends, now after this inauguration we have our own Congress now here, second term, so to say, second session today, and I would, today I welcome you, all of you. I hope that our member from North Macedonia is better, or yes? Oh, it's good, okay. Then today we have now first speeches, and we will see that we have also some time for discussion. And I would like to ask Stanislav Ševčuk to chair today. This would be fine. Can you come here? Yeah. Thank you. Is here. Yeah, you are also.
Yes. Yes, I need a strong supporter from Georgia to moderate
Yes, of course.
this event. I start and Zaza continues. So it's real great, this event in Madrid, great hospitality, and we continue our Congress in Teatro Real, historical place. Our speakers already in Presidia with reports and the willingness to deliver very excellent speeches on the rule of law and constitutionalism. And I would like to give the floor Zaza Tavadza, his co-moderator, to say some words on this event.
I will take this.
Yes, please take a stand.
It works? Yeah, it works. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I'm highly honored to participate in this 21st International Congress on European and comparative constitutional law. This annual event has been a wonderful opportunity for the justices of Constitutional Court to convene and discuss some of the important legal issues of a global character. I would like to express my sincere gratitude personally to Professor Arnold, head of the Jean Monnet Department and Secretary General of the Network of European Constitutional Law, as well as the Constitutional Court of Spain and other partner organizations for arranging and hosting this event. I would like to emphasize the substance of the present session, which is related to the rule of law in the new democracies. After the collapse of Soviet Union, our region saw the changes of enormous magnitude. Many countries regained their independence and went to contract a rule-based democratic model of governance. As part of this process, constitutional review bodies were introduced all across the region in order to ensure the supremacy of the basic of law by keeping government within constitutionality limited powers. Nonetheless, the notion of judicial review was totally new phenomenon to the Eastern European region, and it had proved particularly difficult from the very beginning to the constitutional courts functioning properly. Over the years, thought constitutional justice has become the determinant of democracy and the rule of law in region. This is the case in Georgia, where the Constitutional Court has been constantly developing these 2 decades. We have been able to accumulate significant experience and helped to create rich constitutional case law, which I believe is going to serve as basis for strengthening the rule of law in the country. Apart from success stories, unfortunately, constitutional justice in Europe also faces emerging challenges, including various forms of undue influence that hinder the proper functioning of constitutional justice. We must not shy away from openly discussing any of those problems that hinder proper functioning of the constitutional justice. I believe it will help us to find ways to overcome such difficulties. I am glad that during this conference we will have opportunity to hear the report from high-profile legal experts and practitioners on this issue. That will encourage debate and help us to reflect on our experience and share our perspectives. Thank you very much for your attention.
Please take a seat, and now we continue our program. I would like to give floor with pleasure, especially our permanent participant of our meetings on the Congress, European and Constitutional Law, President of the Bosnia-Herzegovina Court, Zlatko Knežević.
Ну, спасибо вам.
Дуже дякую.
What's this? It's not here.
Zlatko also is member of Venice Commission. Is a member of Venice Commission, actively participates in the work of subcommissions of judiciary system, fundamental rights, and minority rights. Prior to joining the Constitutional Court, he was a member of the High Judicial Prosecutorial Council of Bosnia and Herzegovina and president of Executive Committee of the Bar Association Republika Srpska. So many good profiles, so please, the floor is yours, Zlatko.
Thank you. Thank you, my dear friend. Спасибо. Слушайте вам, только мои приятели. No, my topics in honorable colleagues, of course, Professor Arnold. My topics is decisive role of Constitutional Court in resolving social conflicts, tendency of contemporary constitutionality in case of Bosnia and Herzegovina. You know, Bosnia and Herzegovina has a specific social structure and a rather complicated constitutional structure. Only as an introduction, Bosnia and Herzegovina consists of 2 entities, 1 district, and one of entities consists of 10 cantons. In addition, there is state structure on the state level. Each of aforementioned constitutional categories has its own constitutions and laws, and there are 3 constitutional courts. Constitutional Court of Bosnia and Herzegovina and 2 constitutional courts and entities with different jurisdictions. Yes, Bosnia and Herzegovina has, like other countries in former Yugoslavia, having very old constitutional court in 1963 in former Yugoslavia, in 1964 in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and now in 55 anniversary constitutional court this year. When we speak of the roles of constitutional courts in the constitutional legal order of a country, we come up with 2 models. The classical and almost predominant model of Carlsen's court, or attempt to convert the constitutional court into a sui generis body, which, in addition on the role of a negative legislator obtains and or takes on new role in abstract control of constitutionality and declares which norms are in force and when a certain norm is declared unconstitutional and legislator fails to amend that norm. It thus goes into the sphere of legislative authority or in the area of positive constitutional activity, positive activism. Given that the topic in this paper is neither negative or positive constitutional legal activism, we only mention them because it seems to us the role of Constitutional Court in the Kelsen's model is also neglected within political relationships in certain society, or rather, the consequences of Constitutional Court's decisions within the political movement a country. As a result of overloading the Constitutional Court with the protection of fundamental human rights and freedoms, either the highest court or as an interpreter of norms relating to fundamental human rights and freedoms. But we are therefore, when in constitutional courts find themselves in the position of deciding a particular social conflicts, no matter how two advocates for or against try to substantiate their claims with legal reasons, they essentially seek of the Constitutional Court by a decision resolves the social conflicts. In Bosnia, for point of my topic, two cases in Bosnia and Herzegovina constitutional courts. Just for introduce one case with very famous case of Day of Republika Srpska, 9 January, and second case is in other entity in Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's an electoral law. So, for conclusions, could also be follows. In the first case, the Constitutional Court not only failed to resolve a social conflict, but on my say this strangled in irreconcilable views of the two parties. Will the second case of conclusion meet be the Constitutional Court periodically resolved the social conflicts and instructed other instructions in the election process about the decision-making process in regards of the fact that the election law was not formally amended in accordance with decision of the Constitutional Court. There was actual acceptance and application of the law in the course of formation of government. But what does this tell us? Constitutional Court, which decides and final interprets not only on the Constitution but also of the entire constitutional and legal system, can be faced, as in two examples, with a resolution of dispute by no longer interpreting the norm, but rather by making a final decision on social conflict. Decisions of Constitutional Court may be formally accepted, but in their essence not applied, or may be formally unaccepted, but factually applied. Conflicts remain. Social tensions are not reduced, but just waiting for a new opportunity to arise. In the case, there is a question whether the Constitutional Court should stop on classical model of a negative legislator or cross the Rubicon and take to positive activism in its own hands with a big question. Although this might sound harsh, but it is probably true. Do when they enter the zone of dictatorship of constitutionality, in which one institution is replaced by its legislative elected in the general election. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. President, for your speech. Now, according to our program, I would like to give the floor to Vice President of the Constitutional Court of Croatia, Mrs. Bežić Snežana.
But I'm not on the agenda.
Yes.
You
You are in, but we are still waiting for you in the empty chair. But it's unusually for us, but
Okay,
that
thank you very
he's not.
much.
And
Thank you. I'm ready anyway.
you're ready. Yes,
Yes, I am.
I would like to give some introduction.
Okay, thank you.
Prior to becoming a judge of the Constitutional Court, Snežana Bežić worked with various state institutions, Deputy Minister of Justice, and State Secretary of the Ministry of Justice. She was head of the Office for Legislation of the Croatian government and was elected as a judge of the Zagreb County Court. And also quite extensive experience working on the various governmental institutions and scholar work. Snežana is author of the book The Principle of Proportionality in the Case Law of European Courts and the Croatian Constitutional Court, as many other professional and research papers in civil law. So, Snežana, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You learned the lesson well. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, please allow me first to thank our hosts for the excellent choice of subject and for gathering us all here in Madrid. I would like especially to thank Professor Arnold for inviting President Šeparović and me to this Congress and giving me us the opportunity to address you. Coming to the subject, I wish to inform you about the fundamental values and principles enshrined in the Croatian Constitution and how the Croatian Constitutional Court interprets and applies them in its jurisprudence. Constitution of the Republic of Croatia does not explicitly lay down fundamental principles, but in Article 3, the highest values of the constitutional order are listed as the basis for its interpretation. The fundamental values, concepts of the Croatian Constitution, not only the principles laid down in Article 3, of course, but also those of other provisions. For example, Article 1, Paragraph 1 of the Constitution defines the Republic of Croatia as a unitary and indivisible democratic and social state, and Paragraph 2 of the same article contains the principle of people's sovereignty. The Croatian Constitutional Court has added to the constitutional identity, or we believe so, of the Republic of Croatia the highest values of its constitutional order. Thus, the Constitutional has not expressis verbis determined the highest values of the constitutional order as principles. Functionally, they are principles. These are generally accepted ethical values both in society and in law. They are given a regulative role sui generis, and in the Constitution they are defined as the basis for its interpretation, thus making it possible for the Constitutional Court to interpret the constitutional provisions progressively and dynamically in the light of these living and conceptually and methodologically complex value concepts. Namely, these principles make it possible for judges to adjudicate not only on facts but also on law, and in such a way, by applying these principles, they avoid unacceptable and unforeseeable consequences of the application of some positive law provisions. This provision gives the Constitution a certain flexibility it would otherwise not have. Therefore, there are some implicit principles that are considered to be integral parts of the Constitution. They can be found when the constitutional text is analyzed or read between the lines. These are usually concepts with a high level of generalization. For example, from the concept of the rule of law, a whole series of implicit principles have emerged in the Croatian legal system, adopted from foreign legal sources. They can also be hidden in a relevant moral and political context, such as the freedom and types of equality. The reason for the existence of implicit principles should be sought in the abstract and static quality of the constitutional norms on the one hand, and in the specific and dynamic character of society on the other. Implicit principles ensure the flexibility of the Constitution because they allow us for its interpretation adjusted to the relevant changes in society, as well as for the protection of its fundamental values. These principles in the Constitutional jurisprudence ensure the consistency of the Constitution with current, domestic, foreign, and international social values, circumstances, and expectations. Thus, the Croatian Constitutional Court, in its case law, applies implicit and, of course, explicit principles as guidelines to understand and interpret constitutional provisions and to create legally binding decisions. The Court uses these principles to give more legal force to its statements of reasons in its decisions. These statements of reasons are constitutional case law and international and regional instruments or hard and soft international law. Homogeneously defined principles are those that are understood in practice are applied identically and not differently. Such homogeneously defined principles assure and enable the harmonization of individual constitutional orders, in particular, I believe, those of countries still in transition, or to use Venice Commission wording, young democracies, mutually, as well as with those of Europe. They are the bridges between the international and domestic law, thus enabling the incorporation of international legal concepts into national legal orders. In brief, implicit principles make it possible to progressively interpret the Constitution. In Croatia, implicit principles are derived from domestic constitutional law and European and international law, including soft laws such as, for example, the opinions, reports, and studies of the Venice Commission. However, even principles that have their roots in domestic constitutional law have their sources in terms of content in regional and international sources of law, particularly those dealing with human rights, as well as in foreign constitutional law, in our case, in particular the case law of German Federal Constitutional Court. In brief, implicit principles, as a rule, spring from generally recognized legal principles, the principles of European and international law and human rights. Today, many human rights are viewed as principles, for example, the prohibition of discrimination and equality of all before the law. However, different from implicit principles, human rights are codified and can be found in constitutions or in charters or conventions from which they derive their legal force. One of the largest sources of implicit principles is the concept of the rule of law, from which many principles are derived, such as the principle of legal certainty, legitimate expectations, the clarity and precision of legal provisions, a fair trial, and the prohibition of arbitrariness. As already mentioned, in the Croatian Constitution, the rule of law is not precisely defined, but it's simply described as one of the highest values of the constitutional order. However, the Constitutional Court has defined the content of this concept of the rule of law in its case law on the model of the European concept of the rule of law. After all, dear colleagues, President Riva mentioned yesterday and some speakers during our first session, and today some of our speakers already mentioned the Kelsen and its legacy. And I believe all in spite of the differences in our constitutional legal systems, it is one of our common ground and our common inheritance. In brief, it can be said that the Constitutional Court has taken an active approach in determining and formulating constitutional principles. In doing so, it has used all the valuable methods, grammatical, systemic, historical, theological, and comparative methods, as well as techniques of interpretation. Furthermore, under the direct or indirect impact of the Constitutional Court, the Croatian Parliament amended Article 4 of the Constitution of the Republic of Croatia, dealing with the separation of powers, Article 16 dealing with the principle of proportionality, and Article 29 dealing with the right to fair trial. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, my written contribution is originally, or was originally followed by the PowerPoint presentation on which some of the extracts, some quotation from our decisions were shown or displayed, but unfortunately, because of the accommodational and technical reasons, it was not possible to be presented today. Anyway, I'm ready to take part in this discussion and to elaborate them during discussion in more detail. On behalf of Croatian delegation, thank you for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much for your excellent presentation. And we'll continue according to our program. Next speaker is the President of Constitutional Court of Lithuania, Professor Dainius Žalimas. In early 90s, Dainius Žalimas actually participated in the defense of the independence of Republic of Lithuania against the Soviet aggression. He's professor of constitutional law and a big friend of our countries who are neighboring, who are post-Soviet, so-called post-Soviet countries, but new democracies. We are actively building the rule of law and constitutional democracy in our countries, particularly for Ukraine. Dainius is a big friend of Ukraine and active promoter of idea of geopolitical constitutional orientation of the state towards the EU and NATO. Now we have the visible and tangible results, but as well as for other countries. For Georgia, he's well known in Georgia and Moldova. In October 2016, President of the Republic of Moldova, Nicolae Timofti, conferred the Order of Honor to Mr. Žalimas for substantial contribution to the development and strengthening of interdepartment cooperation in the field of constitutional law between Lithuania and Moldova. Also, President Žalimas is active founder of our association, BBCJ, Baltic Black Sea Association of Constitutional Justice, with now active members, five active members of this association: Lithuania, Georgia, Poland, Moldova, and Ukraine. In Ukraine, Dainius, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stanislav. Indeed, I'm honored, but first of all, let me express my gratitude to Professor Arnold, who also gathers us, and he actually was the example to gather the likely-minded people, likely-oriented people in our association, BBCJ. Let me start, of course, I understand the time is limited, therefore when I have such a theme that is rule of law and the jurisprudence of the Constitutional Court of Lithuania, I understand that it's impossible to cover everything. Of course, it's cornerstone of our legal system. We have a few hundred pages written on the rule of law. It is maybe the broadest possible principle of integrative nature, integrates our values, our principles, and if even to try to enumerate all values and principles integrated by the rule of law, which, by the way, it's only one statement in the preamble of our constitution, then it would take, I don't know, an hour or so. Therefore, I decided just to select one case, the last case, just in order what challenges are faced, for example, in our country. Maybe sooner or later they will be faced in your countries, because I know that it's the question about referendum. So in Moldova and in Lithuania we will have the similar referendum on the reduction of members of the parliament, which to my mind a little bit populistic idea, but usually, referendums sometimes as an instrument of direct democracy, they have two sides. One positive, of course, it's the element to express the power of the people, but sometimes they can be used also as a tool for implementing populistic ideas and populistic policies. That is also often emphasized by political scientists. Therefore, I decided just to focus on one case. It was decided last Friday on the referendum, and it's quite a good example to show how the rule of law, the principle of the rule of law, is applied in practice, by way also revealing what is implicit in the Constitution, just to continue the previous speaker. So the essence of the case, we actually had very unique regulation on the referendum. I think unique maybe in the world, which provided for a possibility to hold the referendum for unlimited number of days with unlimited number of breaks, because it was allowed for the parliament to establish that the referendum can take place more than one day. and nothing more. So, and actually the referendum which was challenged before the court, it was decided to hold the referendum coinciding it with 2 days of presidential elections. I mean, first round and the second round, so 2 days with a break of 2 weeks. It is really, by the way, unique because as far as we collected all the material from the Venice Commission, from our partner courts, we have never seen the regulation like that. Only in the Czech Republic, in Finland, I know in Poland, but it's doubtful nature, let's say, from the constitutional point of view, because we decided that it's impossible to hold elections in 2 consecutive days. But both in the Czech Republic and in Finland, the referendum can last only 2 consecutive days in case when it coincides with elections, which also provided to take place in 2 consecutive days. And of course, the provision allowing for the parliament to declare that the referendum can last more than 1 day was based on purely literal interpretation of the constitution, because as regards with election, it is clearly stated, even the date, clearly fixed date, for example, the second Sunday of October for regular parliamentary election. For the referendum, there is nothing, only one provision that the most important issues can be decided by referendum. And therefore, the legislator was of the opinion that it can establish any rule it wishes for in order, frankly speaking, to achieve the desired threshold or turnout of voters in the referendum. And of course, we had 2 options. One is literal, just to follow the logic of legislator, saying that the constitution leaves wide room for a legislator to regulate this issue. Another one, just to act what is sometimes can be called as maybe even positive legislative activity, and to establish the rule, to find it in the constitution. So of course we decided to act in accordance with the rule of law, and the answer of the Constitutional Court was the rejection of a blind and literal interpretation of the Constitution, just putting the provision on the referendums in the wider context and in understanding it in the light of the rule of law. So first of all, because it is also the rule of law, the direct democracy, both forms of direct democracy, elections and referendum, they are based on the same constitutional foundation, that is, sovereignty belongs to the people, direct and indirect democracy, and electoral law. So that is why we decided, maybe it's nothing new, but nevertheless it's not written in the text of the Constitution, that in order to establish the genuine and real will of people in the referendum as well as in the elections, the democratic principles, electoral principles, should be applied also to referendums. And we established even very detailed and concrete rule. Therefore, the referendum as well as elections can last only 1 day. Why 1 day? The answer also lies in the principle of the rule of law, because what is inseparable from the rule of law, that is the principle of legal certainty and clarity, and on the other hand, we have a principle of a fair and transparent electoral process. Therefore, the referendum process should be the same, also fair and transparent, and therefore it precludes the power for the legislator, for the authority proclaiming the referendum, because in Lithuania it is the parliament. It restricts the power of legislator to differentiate referendums. And following the example of our Polish colleagues, they decided in a similar manner the issue on national elections. We established that the parliament cannot be given discretion to differentiate referendums. That is mean to promote one referendums by setting for them maybe 2 or even 10 days, just in order to get the desired results and to discourage another referendums by establishing one day. And that is also a guarantee that all referendums, irrespective what the legislator thinks about the referendum, should be exercised in their equal conditions, in the same conditions. And therefore, we also found in the Constitution very detailed and very concrete rule. The referendum should be held only during one day, and usually on Sundays, like election. That is the example of the application of the rule of law. And I don't know, maybe it's also positive legislator, but who else, if not us, would defend actually democracy and the rule of law? Because otherwise, if to follow literal interpretation, then everything is allowed, and all the referendums on all issues can last such time as necessary for political authorities to achieve their desired results. So thank you for your attention, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Denis. Now I would like to give a floor to myself, if it's possible. It's unusual, but it's our forum. It's a Constitutional Comparative Law Congress. It's possible. Everything is possible. Yes, and I would like to give. I transfer my power to co-chair.
Floor is your, Mr. Chair. Please.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, I would like to express the joy and honor of being in your presence on the occasion of the 21st already International Congress on European and Comparative Constitutional Law. I take this occasion to address the tangled relationship between two essentially contested concepts, democracy and the rule of law. As viewed for the Constitutional Bench, these concepts should be viewed as a pragmatic rather than metaphysical goods, whereas they are not especially helpful as simple invocation of formulas. New constitutional tribunals in various democracies face the delicate task to strike a pragmatic and political balance between democracy and the rule of law. Protection of the Constitution, its core values and principles, often requires balancing costs and needs to the stability and availability of both democracy and the rule of law. As a collateral effect, this balancing that may require different approaches in different societies threatens to make a devastating blow on the universal assumption of the rule of law universally. And here we encounter another puzzle, as another universally shared assumption treats democracy and the rule of law as distinct concept, the rule of law being viewed as largely juridical terms. This assumption opens the door or in many societies levels with the grounds the key stronghold against populist assault. My point is that may be a distinction between the rule of law and its implementation, but democracy itself is a key method of implementing the rule of law. The rule of law is generated in stable democracies, not so much within the judicial process, but in proper operation of the political process itself. If democratic process becomes dysfunctional, constitutional and judicial response to the disease outbreak should be premised on the axiom that democracy is not distinct from the rule of law, but is a form of the rule of law. If you refute the said assumption that the rule of law and democracy are distinct, we simultaneously acquire a new weapon against the democracy's majoritarian access, and paradoxically embed a concrete form of democracy as the only form compatible with a democratic constitution. This is a difficult choice because we take a concrete understanding of the constitution makers, will that might not coincide with actual historic meaning and constitutional narrative. Therefore, it's my understanding that if we, Constitutional Bench, should strike a fair balance between the need to protect constitutional democracy as a form of the rule of law implementation and the need to preserve sound ethos and accommodate future development of new democratic forms, new forms of the rule of law implementation. The thoughts above are not mere academic inferences. It may be not so obvious in stable democracies, but in new democratic regimes that have no privilege or reliance on strong democratic tradition. The problem is not why courts stands against the will of democratically elected bodies, but why they fail to do so effectively when these bodies violate constitutional principles and rights. I see the roots of this problem in that courts fail to treat democracy and the rule of law as intrinsically related. Since the beginning of the 2000 years, the rise of political populism has helped to create a wide array of illiberal conventions underlying the functioning of many constitutional bodies, courts included. The latter appear unable to withstand the ordeal of constitutional populism. Constitutionalism is antithetical to populism. First, because populism is usually associated to illiberal politics and fluid majorities of the day. Second, because populism at its essence is an anti-system phenomenon. Constitutional Court, as guardian of the Constitution, in many instances is becoming the final barricade against populist assaults on democracy and constitutional values. But the irony of the moment that without popular support, a constitutional court may not withstand democracy's majoritarian doom. In April 2018, the Constitutional Court of Ukraine repealed in total the referendum law as unconstitutional. In this judgment, the court referred not only to procedural irregularities of the legislative enactment, but also invoked substantive unconstitutionality, whereas the parliament encroaches on issues that are reserved to constitutional regulations. The law was controversial because it opened the door for adopting a completely new constitution by a nationwide referendum without using the amendment procedure of the current constitution. The same, it's also, according to this law, was possible to make changes to the constitution out of the procedure prescribed by the constitution through the parliament. So parliament was out of the process according to this law. But according to the constitution, the parliament has a stand to change the constitution, to make amendments. Such a provision was rightly seen as a major risk for upsetting the constitutional order. I see the judgment is an important tool to tame populism's threat. Democracy, by definition, is a rule by majority. It has the inherent danger of becoming a tyranny of the majority. The real danger of majoritarian excesses is that unrestricted majority rule can easily overstep constitutionally imposed limits in pursuing short-lived political gains. In February 2018, the Constitutional Court of Ukraine annulled in total the law on the foundation of state linguistic policy. The disputed piece of legislation was challenged within the both procedural and substantive arguments. The heaviest procedural argument was the discrepancy between the number of votes for the adoption of the law and the number of deputies actually present, in particular during the respective voting. A lot of evidence proved this discrepancy, including the video record of the session, which was all acknowledged and considered by the court. This is not the first instance when the court confronted the issue of procedural irregularities in adopting legislation. But in this case, it was brutal violation of the procedure with physical attempt to block deputies, to abstain them from voters, and also the law was adopted during 45 seconds without any deliberation in committees and first and second and third readings, just for 45 seconds, two political mechanism to during the regime of President Yanukovych to be more closer to Russia using this instrument. Dismantling the wall between the rule of law and democracy allows the more scrutiny about our legislative discretion in terms of setting the standards for positive obligations that are binding the elected representative no less than for the executive. In June 2018, the Constitutional Court of Ukraine invalidated the system of penitentiary investigators introduced recently into the Court of Criminal Procedure. The system was based on executive investigatory jurisdiction of penitentiary investigators over any offense committed conducted in penitentiary facilities, but both penitentiary investigators and penitentiary establishments were subordinated to the Minister of Justice. The Constitutional Court of Ukraine noted that this system is not capable to ensure effective investigation of violations of constitutional human rights for life and respect for human dignity and prohibition of torture as well. So positive obligations of the state under the Constitution, because parliamentary penitentiary investigators was under direct subordination to the Ministry of Justice. So it's a violation of positive obligations of the state in terms of independence of investigation. Finally, I would like to address the issue of effectiveness of the Constitutional Court's weaponry. Tools deployed by populism in power to tame a Constitutional Court largely exploit its inability to speak on its own motion. So restrictions on access to court and deliberate hindrances in court promulgating its judgment are key element in taming constitutional courts. Even omnipotent courts must wait until a case is filled. Dear colleagues, Ukraine shares common history, culture and traditions with European nations. Despite the prolonged involuntary detachment of Ukraine from European Brotherhood of Nations, Ukrainians harbored memory and aspirations dating back to the Kiev Rus, Grand Duchy of Lithuania and Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. When Ukraine gained independence, this ancestral memory resurfaced and pro-European vector of development became part of the national ethos. In late 2018, the Constitutional Court of Ukraine blessed amendments to the Constitution's preamble to reflect these aspirations. One of the motives that was driven the court to do so is that this solemn declaration will make our return to Europe irreversible and will commit us to the strong courageous in protecting democracy and the rule of law. Now provisions of the European identity of Ukrainian people and the course of Ukrainian state towards EU-NATO is a part of our constitution. It's true that the conditions of the post-truth society pose unprecedented challenges, undermine dogmatized ideas, question accepted assumptions. Europe today is undergoing significant political and societal change. Indeed, the complexities are myriad and deep, but the ideal that embedded in the notion of Europe and associated with diversity, democracy, the rule of law, and human rights will guide us amid the storms and turmoils of the upcoming time. Thank you for your attention. Now we continue. Like yes, playing manager in soccer, yes. So we are continuing according to the program. I would like to give a floor to my friend, President of the Constitutional Court of Georgia, Zaza Tavadze, and I would like to say some words because Zaza is the President of the court, and. In previous past, he was worked as a head of legal department in the Ministry of Refugees Accommodation of Georgia in 2004, 2007, and appointed to the member of the Constitutional Court in 2010. But before, he worked also as a Minister of Justice of Georgia and worked in the prosecutor office. So quite extensive and very interesting state practice. But from other side, Zaza is also very active scholar, delivering speeches and continuing the support of our BBC association and our friendship between our courts in our region. So Zaza, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Stas. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here again. Dear colleagues, today I will take this opportunity and speak to you one of the core elements of the rule of law, effective protection of human rights by the Constitutional Court by focusing on the example of Georgia. The Constitutional Court serves as main guarantee for the protection of constitutional rights and promotion rule of law. Thus, effective implementation of its judgments carries crucial role in development of democracy. The Constitutional Court of Georgia, similarly to the courts of other new democracies, has experienced important challenges related to education process, execution and comprehension of its judgments. However, even in a short period of its existence, the court has already developed the case law as well as other instruments to eliminate factors impeding the court's ability to fully exercise its powers. In order to ensure effective protection of human rights, merely equipping the Constitutional Court with competencies to declare provision unconstitutional are not sufficient. In order to be able to completely exercise two powers, the court needs to have flexible legal mechanisms to adapt of the judgments as well as instruments for their implementation without the participation of legislative branch. The court has taken steps for increasing its efficiency in both directions. In Georgia, constitutional proceeding is regulated by the law. Thus, in theory, legislator is equipped to create unnecessary obstacles on decision-making process of the court. However, in several cases, the Constitutional Court of Georgia has already educated on the constitutionality of the provision regulating its proceeding and has annulled certain clauses. For instance, the court has declared the provision restricting the foreigner to apply to the court void and ruled that any individual and legal person is entitled to a constitutional complaint, thus broadening the circle of persons that can lodge a case to the court. The court has also ruled on the constitutionality of regulations regarding to adoption of the judgment and declared that simple majority of the judges hearing the case insignificant for upholding the constitutional complaint, removing yet another obstacle in the decision-making process. Another provision the court has declared void was an impediment of using the interim measures during the proceedings. The court has found that its ability to suspend application of the provision as an interim measure, it's derived directly from the Constitution and it's not specifically started in the text. The interim measure can be used on any stage of the proceeding, either by the chamber of or the grand chamber of the court. Furthermore, the Constitutional Court of Georgia has declared that nominating and electing the president of the court is the constitutionally guaranteed competence of its member. Therefore, declaring the provision limiting this power of the member unconstitutional, ensuring the independence of the Constitutional Court from the executive and legislative branches of government. The judgment of Constitutional Court of Georgia not only declares the provision unconstitutional, but also determines the meaning behind the constitutional provision. Therefore, the ruling by the court precludes the adoption of legislation which similar restrictions on the decision-making process of the Constitutional Court. Additionally, the fact that the court does not fully regulate the details of its own proceedings, ensures the procedure to be carried out based on the constitutional principles. The Constitutional Court of Georgia fully comprehends the significance of effective application of constitutional standards established by the court in individual cases. The provision declared unconstitutional by the Constitutional Court loses legal force once the decision is officially published by the court. However, since the Constitutional Court of Georgia has the authority to rule on constitutionality of the normative acts only, the judgment does not have instant result on individual cases. The Constitutional Court serves as a negative legislator. It invalidates unconstitutional normative acts. However, the application of a new normative reality in individual cases is up to the general courts. Thereby, they serve as an enforcer of the constitutional case law in practice. The general courts are guarantors for effectiveness of the decision of the constitutional courts. Therefore, clear understanding and cooperation between these courts is imperative for effectiveness of constitutional control in our legal system. Constitutional Court of Georgia has developed the notion of normative content of the provision. After developing the mentioned notion, the Constitutional Court can evaluate constitutionality of only the normative meaning of the provision problematic for the claimant. The idea of normative content is based on a simple assumption that the provision is not merely the text written on a paper, but its substance, regulations established by it. It thus follows that formally single text of the legal provision could have several normative meanings. It could be regulating different relationships out of which only some might be challenging. Therefore, the court is authorized to separate different normative meanings from the same text, and if only some are problematic, declare them unconstitutional without invalidating remaining normative substance of the provision. By introducing the mentioned notion, the Constitutional Court is enabled to rule on more specific issues, making it easier to settle an actual problem identified by the claimant. It is one of the most effective ways to evaluate constitutionality of interpretation of the law made by the General Court with the competence of normative control. Thus, evaluating the constitutionality of the problematic normative meaning of the provision allows the constitutional courts of Georgia to be almost as effective as the constitutional courts, which have the competence to review constitutionality of the judgment of general courts. The current comprehension of the constitutional standards by interested parties is also very crucial for effective protection of human rights in Georgia. Misinterpreting the court judgment might lead to ability of harmful application of judgment as well as damage to the authority of the court. Therefore, these representatives of the Constitutional Court of Georgia regularly participate in public decisions organized around the judgment. The court regularly meets with representatives from NGOs and academia to discuss new development in the case law. The work of the court, as well as the development of legal culture and education in Georgia, has led to dramatic increase of interest toward the court. The number of constitutional complaints as well as judgment delivered by the court increases annually, evidencing to the need and benefits of further dialogue with the stakeholders. In short, I believe it is fair to note that although some challenges were exercised and different stage of functioning of the Constitutional Court of Georgia, the court has been able to successfully cope of Georgia with these challenges and has managed to emerge as a strong institution of constitutional justice, serving as an effective mechanism for the protection of human rights and freedom in Georgia. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Zaza. And we continue our work. I would like to give the floor to Dragoljub Drašković, the president of the Constitutional Court of Republic of Montenegro, with the topic of presentation of the constitutional legal status of the Constitutional Court of Montenegro. Please, the floor is yours.
Honorable Professor Arnold, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, my subject is close theoretical determination of the constitutional and legal status of the Constitutional Court of Montenegro within the constitutional and legal system of Montenegro, which should hopefully contribute to broader and more accurate understanding of its constitutionally defined position and role in that system, and the importance of constitutional justice for rule of law. Just like many European countries, such as Austria and Germany, Montenegro introduced the European civil law model of constitutional protection based on Kelser's theory of a centralized control system where reviews and performed by a special and independent body, the Constitutional Courts, along with all the basic elements of the concept in terms of appointing judges, decisions making, form and consequences of the court's decision, etc. According to the Constitution of Montenegro, the system of governments is organized according to the principle of separation of powers, which is defined in a special part of the Constitution which deals with government in general. At the same time, the Constitutional Court protects the constitutionality and legality and defined in a special part of Constitution as well. Through such a structural concept, the Constitution clearly separates the Constitutional Court's position from all other branches and state authority bodies and establish it as a special constitutional category within the Constitution and legal order, the highest constitutional body and constitutional power sui generis, which has a special place within the entire structure of state authority. The position and role of the constitutional courts within the constitutional and legal order of Montenegro essentially represent and basis for the potential analysis of the mutual relationship among the Constitutional Court and other state authorities and bodies. This aspect of the Constitutional Court's position and role can be specifically observed in relation to the position and role of the judiciary in that system. It was precisely the introduction of the constitutional complaint by the Constitution of Montenegro in 2007 as the new legal remedy for protecting the citizens' rights against the decisions of state authorities and above all against the decisions of ordinary courts, when the decisions of the judiciary are immediately subjected to constitutional review, the further brought to attention and emphasizes the relationship among the Constitutional Court and ordinary courts. The constitutional procedure represents neither an ordinary nor an extraordinary legal remedy, but rather a special institute for reviewing individual state authority acts from the perspective of the protection of human rights and freedoms. The constitutional complaints procedure before Constitutional Court especially points towards the strong connection and interrelationship between the judiciary and the Constitutional Court, and basically towards the participation of the judiciary in procedure before the Constitutional Court, but also the participation of the Constitutional Court in the protection of human rights and fundamental freedoms if they could not be protected before ordinary courts. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And today we have mostly section of presidents, as far as I understand. Yes, all presidents, and I would like to give floor the next president speaker, to President of the Hungarian Constitutional Court, Tamás Surok, with a topic on the rule of law and jurisprudence, general aspects, but you will say more precisely about your topic.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed presidents, judges, professors, and friends. My topic is for this day the contribution of the Hungarian Constitutional Court to the rule of law in Hungary. It's a great honor for me to have been invited here today to speak in this prestigious Congress dedicated to the protection of rule of law and respect for fundamental freedoms. The Hungarian Constitutional Court is fully aware of the responsibilities of jurists to promote these universal values and deeply committed to shaping and strengthening democratic values and norms, and above all is determined to act as a guardian of the rule of law. The prestigious World Justice Project, an independent organization working to advance the rule of law worldwide, defines the rule of law as the combination of the following four principles. The first principle is accountability, which means that the government and the private actors are equally accountable under the law. The second principle of just laws states that the laws must be clear, publicized, stable, and just, and must be applied evenly and protect fundamental rights. The principle of open government requires that processes by which the laws are enacted, administered, and enforced should be accessible, fair, and efficient. Finally, the idea of accessible and impartial dispute resolution presumes the justice in deliver timely, be competent, ethical, and independent representatives and neutral bodies which are accessible, have adequate resources, and reflect the makeup of the communities they serve. The working of the principle of accountability in the practice of the Hungarian Constitutional Court can be best understood if we examine its competencies in a historical perspective. Before 2012, the Hungarian Constitutional Court controlled only the legislation, mainly through posterior abstract norm control. In 2012, the Hungarian fundamental law extended the powers of the Constitutional Court, and it now performs a full-scale constitutional control through its various competencies over the legislation, through abstract norm control, preliminary and posterior norm controls, through concrete norm control, judicial initiative, and two types of constitutional complaints, complaint against the applied norm and complaint against the direct application of the norm. And through the judiciary directly, by way of constitutional complaint against the judicial decision, this is the German Urteilsverfassungsbeschwerde, Spanish amparo, and over the executive indirectly through the constitutional complaint against the judicial decision, Urteilsverfassungsbeschwerde, the amparo. These competences clearly reflect that in the new system, all three branches of government, the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary, can be held accountable by the Hungarian Constitutional Court. Let me describe two landmark cases of the court which reflect how the principle of just law is enforced in the decisions of the Constitutional Court. In the first decision, the court declined the complaint of a discotheque that applied different rules of the entry of women and men. The court stated that prohibition of discrimination is to be applied also in the private sector, especially when the provided service is open to the public. The court advocated the social equality is a constitutional value, and the prohibition of discrimination safeguards the right to human dignity. In another case, a transsexual refugee filed an application for gender reassignment to the competent authority because the description in his official documents, female, didn't match his real gender identity. The Constitutional Court stated that the absence of any regulation that provides a name-changing procedure for lawfully settled non-Hungarian citizens violated the right to human dignity and the prohibition of discrimination. In both cases, the Constitutional Court acted in line with the principle of just laws. An important decision of the Constitutional Court was given a lot of publicity as it unequivocally emphasized the protection of the freedom of press. In this case, the court held that it cannot be regarded as a rumor spreading if a report is published in the press about a press conference on public matters, if it gives a true and accurate account of the event without any subjective evaluation, and clearly indicates the source of information, and it gives the opportunity to publish a response or rebut the statements that may cause reputational damage. The Hungarian Constitutional Court also pointed out that reporting about a press conference held by public figures is regarded as an exception when journalists are released from their obligation to verify the truthfulness of the facts published. The court ruling underpinned the idea of open government. The accessibility and impartiality of dispute resolution is a major cornerstone of rule of law, which is reflected in jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights. I would like to mention here two relevant decisions of the Hungarian Constitutional Court. In the first decision, the court pointed out that a judge cannot be engaged in a judicial review of a criminal procedure if he or she was involved in any earlier stage of the procedure, including the investigation of the case. In its ruling, the Hungarian Constitutional Court promoted the protection of the right to fair trial in line with the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights. In another decision, the Hungarian Constitutional Court followed the principles elaborated by the European Court of Human Rights, which established the criteria on the basis of which a judge can consider whether the length of a criminal procedure has violated the right to a fair hearing under the fundamental law. Again, the Hungarian Constitutional Court stood up for the protection of the right to fair trial, following the practice of the European Court of Human Rights. Statistics also reveal that 75% of the legal regulations which violated basic rights and values and were annulled by the Hungarian Constitutional Court were related to the principle of rule of law and the other fundamental rights. I also pointed out earlier that the Hungarian Constitutional Court firmly advocates dialogue and cooperation between constitutional courts. After 2012, 48 decisions were based on the case law of the European Court of Human Rights, which account for 19% of all cases. This is almost a 200% increase compared to the period between 1990 and 2012. Last year, the Hungarian Constitutional Court suspended 2 cases which regard to the infringement procedures on the same issues before the European Court of Justice. In the rulings of the Hungarian Constitutional Court, the Venice Commission documents were cited more frequently, 15 times, between 2012 and 2018, than earlier, from 19 to 2012, 4 times. Finally, I would like to stress once more the vital importance of international constitutional dialogue. We believe that the Hungarian Constitutional Court is contributing a strong and well-functioning European network of constitutional courts. It is German, the Verfassungsgerichtsverbund. Naturally, this idea is not new because it was first proposed by Dr. András Foszkula, the president of the Federal Constitutional Court of Germany. The Hungarian Constitutional Court transformed this scholarly abstraction in the binding law in its decision number 22 from 2016, when it stated that the Hungarian Constitutional Court considers the constitutional dialogue within the European Union to be of primary importance. The Hungarian Constitutional Court has a vital role in safeguarding in the rule of law in Hungary through the promotion of its 4 universal principles, and is an active member of international constitutional dialogue. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And the last speaker of this session, the professor and judge of the Moldovan Constitutional Court, Aurel Bieshu, with the topic of presentation, the limite au pouvoir de révision de la Constitution, le cas de la République de Moldova. Please, Aurel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mesdames et messieurs, chers collègues, tout d'abord, je suis honoré de prendre la parole dans cette section des présidents, mais je ne suis pas président. J'ai choisi pour mon exposé un sujet particulier de la problématique très complexe de l'état de droit. Il s'agit des limites au pouvoir de la révision de la Constitution. L'exigence de l'état de droit impose que la Constitution soit un cadre pour l'action politique et pas un instrument à son service. Dans cet ordre d'idées, un auteur notoire, Stockton, a affirmé d'une manière assez plastique que les constitutions sont des chaînes avec lesquelles les hommes se ligotent dans les moments où ils sont sains d'esprit pour ne pas mourir d'une main suicidaire dans leur moment de folie. C'est pour ça que dans la plupart des pays, les exigences relatives au droit de l'amendement constitutionnel sont assez strictes et rigides. Cette rigidité de la Constitution est une garantie de sa stabilité, mais aussi de la stabilité de l'ensemble du système normatif de l'État, la certitude et la prévisibilité du comportement humain étant nécessaires à la sécurité juridique des relations sociales comme élément indispensable de l'état de droit. La Constitution de la République de Moldova, en tant que loi suprême, est relativement rigide dans le sens qu'elle accepte la révision, mais uniquement par un système technique prédéterminé par la Constitution. Dans notre pays, la Cour constitutionnelle est invitée et investie d'un rôle actif dans la procédure de l'amendement constitutionnel. En tant que garant de la suprématie de la Constitution, la Cour effectue le contrôle a priori de toute initiative de révision de la Constitution. Une proposition d'amendement ne peut pas être soumise au Parlement que si elle a obtenu le soutien d'au moins 4 juges du nombre de 6. Dans un arrêt de 2016, la Cour a souligné que la compétence de l'approbation obligatoire des projets d'amendement à la Constitution qui lui a été conférée par le législateur compte tenu du rôle et de la position que la Cour occupe dans le système politique et juridique de la société, ce qui lui permet d'analyser les amendements de manière impartiale, loin de la tentation des acteurs politiques de prendre des décisions conjoncturelles. Dans ce contexte, les avis de la Cour sur la modification de la Constitution ne sont pas de simples formalités, mais visent à protéger les valeurs fondamentales de la Constitution contre les pratiques abusives des acteurs politiques, sociaux ou institutionnels. Dans cette procédure, tout d'abord, la Cour vérifie si les limites matérielles, intrinsèques et temporelles extrinsèques de la révision expressément prévues par la Constitution sont respectées. Ainsi, la Constitution, dans l'article 142, institue des dispositions intangibles, immuables, inaltérables. Elle dit qu'aucune révision qui aurait pour résultat la suppression de droits et libertés fondamentales des citoyens ne peut pas être réalisée. Ensuite, la Constitution prévoit que les dispositions portant sur le caractère souverain, indépendant et unitaire de l'État, ainsi que sur la neutralité permanente, peuvent être révisées uniquement par voie de référendum. Cependant, la compétence de la Cour est beaucoup plus large. Elle ne se borne pas au contrôle du respect des limites explicites, expressément prévues par la Constitution, mais aussi des limites implicites qui résultent des principes de base et de l'esprit de la loi fondamentale. La Cour doit veiller à ce qu'aucune modification ne porte pas atteinte à l'harmonie des dispositions constitutionnelles et ne soit pas contraire aux valeurs constitutionnelles qui sont à la base de l'identité constitutionnelle nationale. En ce qui concerne l'harmonie des dispositions constitutionnelles, dans un arrêt de 2016, la Cour a statué que les dispositions de la Constitution forment un système harmonieux, de sorte qu'aucune disposition ne peut pas être contraire aux autres dispositions. C'est impératif qu'aucun changement dans la Constitution ne porte pas atteinte à l'harmonie des dispositions de la Constitution, ne permet pas l'adoption des amendements contraires aux valeurs qui sont à la base de l'État et de la société. Dans une série d'avis sur certaines initiatives de révision constitutionnelle, la Cour a déclaré que la révision initiée devait garantir l'unité de la matière constitutionnelle et l'équilibre entre les règles concurrentes. Ainsi, la Cour a souligné que chaque constitution est un arrangement complexe d'équilibre et de contrepoids et que chaque disposition doit être examinée à la lumière de sa valeur pour l'équilibre du pouvoir en général. Dans un autre arrêt, à la demande sur la proposition des députés du Parti socialiste qui ont proposé d'étendre les pouvoirs discrétionnaires du président en vue de dissolution du Parlement, la Cour a statué que ces propositions n'assurent pas l'équilibre de la matière constitutionnelle dans un régime parlementaire où le pouvoir du président doit être limité et ces propositions pourraient entraver le fonctionnement du pouvoir législatif et des crises constitutionnelles. En ce qui concerne l'identité constitutionnelle, dans l'arrêt de 5 décembre 2013, la Cour a consacré pour la première fois la notion d'identité constitutionnelle nationale qu'elle a expressément qualifié d'intangible et a énuméré les éléments considérés comme essentiels pour définir cette identité, dont les principaux sont aspiration à la liberté, l'indépendance, l'unité nationale, démocratisation, état de droit, économie de marché, garantie des droits de l'homme. Le concept d'identité constitutionnelle nationale a été développé dans un arrêt de 2017 sur le projet de loi d'amendement de Constitution qui propose de compléter la Constitution par un nouvel article selon lequel l'intégration européenne est l'objectif stratégique du développement du pays. Dans cet avis, la Cour a estimé que l'orientation vers l'espace des valeurs démocratiques européennes est un élément définitoire de l'identité constitutionnelle de la République de Moldova. Une question qui se pose dans le contexte des limites matérielles à la révision de la Constitution est de savoir si les dispositions constitutionnelles fixant ces limites peuvent être soumises elles-mêmes à une révision. Dans la doctrine, on a souligné que le pouvoir constituant dérivé a une force juridique inférieure au pouvoir constituant originaire et que la révision hypothétique des dispositions impératives en cause pourrait générer de graves tensions politiques et sociales. Ces estimations semblent être justifiées dans le cas où le pouvoir constituant dérivé essaierait de réviser les dispositions sur les limites de l'amendement dans le sens d'affaiblir la protection offerte aux principes fondamentaux de l'ordre démocratique. Mais quelle sera la réponse si le pouvoir constituant, au contraire, suivrait le but de renforcer la protection de certains principes et dispositions qu'il considère fondamentaux, en les déclarant intangibles ou en établissant des procédures spéciales. Le défi consiste à trouver un juste équilibre entre la rigidité et la souplesse des limites à la révision constitutionnelle, afin que les réformes nécessaires puissent être adoptées sans remettre en cause la stabilité, la prévisibilité et la protection offertes par la Constitution et sans verrouiller le système en rendant l'adoption de l'amendement constitutionnel trop difficile, voire impossible à réaliser. Merci pour votre attention.
Thank you very much. And now we continue according to our program with time for discussions. Yes? Please, who would like to start? Rainer, please. No.
Merci sur l'examen juridictionnel des amendements de la Constitution. Parce que, comme il est connu en Allemagne, il se passe le même. C'est l'article 79 alinéa 3 de notre loi fondamentale qui établit des limites pour la révision constitutionnelle. Et c'est la Cour constitutionnelle qui examine, même si la réforme a été déjà achevée, ça veut dire fait partie des nouvelles dispositions, font partie de la Constitution même, quand même, la Cour constitutionnelle l'examine. 3 à 4 fois, on a fait ça, et en Allemagne, il y a aussi la doctrine, c'est pas... Oui, il existe, alors il n'était pas tué, mais la doctrine du droit constitutionnel inconstitutionnel. Et nous avons des principes de fond comme la dignité humaine, comme l'état de droit et d'autres qui sont sur la base de l'ordre constitutionnel, et les normes constitutionnelles spécifiques doivent s'orienter vers ces principes fondamentaux. La Cour constitutionnelle fédérale allemande a déjà déclaré que la Constitution est un ensemble des normes qui ne connaissent pas de hiérarchie, mais qui s'influencent dans l'interprétation, s'influencent l'une par l'autre, sont influencées l'une par l'autre. Et néanmoins, c'est la pratique de la Cour constitutionnelle de ne pas s'abstenir d'un examen des dispositions constitutionnelles. Alors, c'est en Moldavie la même idée. Dans la doctrine, on débat, s'est déclenché un débat si ce noyau dur d'une constitution existe, même si la constitution ne l'exprime pas, que les fondements sont intangibles, ne peut pas être modifiés, même modifié peut-être, relativisé, adapté au progrès, au développement en cours pour le futur, mais qu'il existe également dans des textes constitutionnels qui ne l'expriment pas, des noyaux qui sont plus ou moins intangibles ou qui doivent être respectés. Et quant à l'identité constitutionnelle, c'est un grand débat en Europe toujours. C'était en Moldavie un congrès il y avait plusieurs années sur cette thématique, je pense, et notre Cour constitutionnelle a développé une notion d'identité constitutionnelle qui s'oriente à l'article mentionné, l'article 79 alinéa 3. On peut, il y a quelques doutes si c'est vraiment l'identité constitutionnelle, parce que je pense que c'est plutôt une notion dynamique qui se développe avec le texte de la Constitution. Mais merci pour ça. I think I must not repeat in English this. C'était adressé à notre orateur, et I also thank, of course, all the others speakers. Very interesting things, but I give the floor back to the next discussant.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your very interesting remarks, Mr. Arnold. Floor is yours.
Dear colleagues, first of all, I want to express my gratitude to Professor Reiner and to his team for all efforts conducted to organize this Congress. I made some notes to try to save your time and trying not to stay 45 minutes. I'm joking, of course. Besides all other open issues related to the rule of law, what we had opportunity to hear today and yesterday, the case of B&H is, let me to say, unusual for the European legal tradition and the European legal culture. Besides unresolved political issues and political pressure on the old judiciary, including the Constitutional Court, that is often presented in the states in transition and in the states with unfinished system of democratic institutions, there is also an issue which should be marked, in my opinion, as very important, although it could be seen as purely technical one. We have a very specific situation which affects rule of law and position of the Constitutional Court as well.
Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Zlatan Begic. I am associate professor from the University of Tuzla, Faculty of Law. and member of the state legislature. Yeah, as I said, we have very specific situation which affects rule of law and position of the Constitutional Court as well, which affects legislature and other elements that build legal system in domino effect. Thanks to Dayton Peace Agreement in B&H, American model of the constitutional regulation is unconsequently combined with the highly centralized European model of the protection of the constitutionality. American model of the very frame, very imprecise, very flexible constitutional norm and regulation based on principles in many cases without going in details, leave the much more free space for the legislators to go beyond the limits set out by the Constitution itself. However, this model of constitutional regulation demands strong decentralized support to assure rule of law and protection of constitutionality. Thanks to the DPA, the position of Constitutional Court is also affected in a way that this court does not support rule of law in full capacity. Based on the constitutional solutions, this court imposed to himself some kind of self-limitation by excluding his jurisdiction in many important cases. And finally, having in mind these issues, it could be said that B&H is a living laboratory presenting in vivo how elements of two great legal traditions, European and Anglo-American tradition, should not be combined ever. In that sense, we in B&H have serious problems of non-implementation rule of law in sufficient and proper way. And we surely will need in the future wide support to preserve and develop democratic values in our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Professor. Any question, any remarks? Please.
Thank you very much. My name is Mirosław Granat. I'm former judge in Polish Constitutional Court. I finished my term of office in April 2016. Yes, after 9 years, my work at the Polish tribunal. So this is beautiful opportunity. Before this is the presidents of the courts from the maybe all countries from the Eastern and Central Europe. And I have a small reflection about the rule of law in our countries, especially from the Polish points of view, because this is very, very interesting discussion and situation in especially in our academia. So according to my point of view, this is the big clash, big confrontation between the Kelsenian model. So the many of speakers invoked it, Kelsenian model here, very, very just. And in Poland, I'm sure that Kelsenian model is rooted very, 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 very well, very, very deep. And obviously a lot of values linked with the Kelsenian models. And at the same time, in Poland, especially maybe among the professors, maybe the politicians, the decisionism of Carl Schmitt is quite popular. According to my opinion, decisionism, according to Schmitt, under to Carl Schmitt, with the role of the will of the nation, the role of the will of the majority of parliament is may be quite dangerous for the Kelsenian model, and I have doubts in Poland about the role of Carl Schmitt and his theory about decisionism. And I hope that the Kelsenian model, despite the fact that it has deficiencies, obviously, flow, etc., and maybe recently in Poland we observe certain deficiencies of this model, but at the other hand, the Kelsenian model has a beautiful attitude, and this model was checked in practice in the European countries and in Central and Eastern model. So I believe in the Kelsenian model, and its future is this model. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Any remarks? Any opinion? No? So we can make some break, yes? Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Thank you.
There ain't nothing like sunshine and air to make you feel